the best beefsteak course is the one that speaks to your tongue. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter how pretty it is. It doesn't matter like the story of the steak. All that shit goes out the window when you take a bite. Like the only thing that matters is you just go, oh man, that's really good. So few of the things that we eat are truly delicious. You know what I mean? And you really have to be paying attention because you can miss it. You can miss it. And it might not be there, not only next week, like once it's gone, like once people finish it, you know, like, can I have more? They're like, it's gone. No, you can't. There's nothing, like I can't make it again. Those are my favorite beefsteak dishes that you just put in your mouth and there's, you know, for whatever reason, you just know immediately that it's delicious.
Greetings and salutations, my fellow plebs. My name is Walker, and this is the Bitcoin Podcast. The Bitcoin time chain is 868,199, and the value of one Bitcoin is still one Bitcoin. Today's episode is Bitcoin Talk, where I talk with my guest about Bitcoin and whatever else comes up. Today, that guest is AWAYSLICE, aka the Beefsteak Guy. His beefsteak events are truly legendary, and he's managed to create an incredible culture around getting people together to eat meat cooked over an open fire with their bare hands. We get into quite a lot today, including but not limited to the origin of beefsteak, beef, food in general, building community, whether AI will take over chefs' jobs, art versus craftsmanship, hosting events and vibe curation, the effects of social media, and a whole lot more. Before we dive in, do me a favor and subscribe to the Bitcoin Podcast wherever you're watching or listening. Check out bitcoinpodcast.net for episodes and additional resources. Head to the show notes to grab discount links for my sponsor Bitbox, or just go directly to bitbox.swiss/Walker and use the promo code Walker. Send an email to hello@bitcoinpodcast.net if you have feedback or if you're interested in sponsoring the Bitcoin Podcast. And if you find this show valuable, consider giving value back by giving it a zap on NOSTR or a boost on Fountain. Without further ado, let's get into this Bitcoin talk with AWAYSLICE. You know how at least like early on in my Bitcoin journey, like the first time sending actually sending a Bitcoin transaction, like I didn't have anyone like walking me through it. Was just like, I'd gone through, read stuff and gone through tutorials, and it's fairly self-explanatory, but you go through it and you're still just like, okay, like, did it work? Like, let me send a little test transaction. Like, what if I what if somehow when I copied it and then pasted it, like it inserted an extra number and I screwed it up? That's still kind of how I feel with some of this stuff on NOSTR, just because it's like, it's still a little bit fresh and new.
Totally.
And you're like, oh, okay, like, did the live stream, like, is it really live right now? Is it really working? But it appears to be. So now we are officially live, but man, stoked to have you here.
That fear is skin in the game, right? Like,
well, yeah.
Last time you had like fear that your credit card transaction would go through, or you know what I mean?
I have more fears of credit card fraud, which is like just seems to happen like fairly regularly. I don't know, just like it's kind of obnoxious. Actually, like when you think about it, like. But yeah, that's fair. Like generally, okay, I swipe my credit card unless like I'm traveling somewhere, and if you're like abroad or whatever, and you didn't alert your credit card company, and then they're like, oh, we're gonna cancel this card right now because we think that somebody in Europe just stole it. And it's like, well, okay, I guess I don't have money.
So has that thing happened to you recently?
Not recently. I think they
like
fixed something.
There's something, but did they fix it? There's something in there where like. They know when I'm traveling now. Like, it's crazy how, I mean, for one thing, I often am using the credit card I bought the airline ticket through, like,
yeah.
Not that they see where I'm going from the purchase transaction, but like, if I show up in Riga and start buying stuff at a grocery store, like, they do not blink an eye. I don't get any pauses or freezes or anything like that. So, feels like they've just gotten way better at just knowing what purchases are and are not. But then on the flip side, they'll be like, you're obviously not in Arkansas at Walmart, right? Like,
yeah.
they know when it's fake too, which is kind of crazy.
It's this reminds me of a friend of ours she was traveling in Europe for a while, made some relatively large, bought herself a couple of nice handbags, designer type handbags, and was not going to, did not declare them, coming back, because you have to declare if you're bringing goods worth whatever more than $10,000, or if you're bringing cash equivalents of more than that, or I think technically you're supposed to declare any sort of goods like above a certain tiny threshold. But she was like, fuck that, I'm not going to do it. She gets back into the country, and at customs, they stop her, and the customs agent says, we see here your credit card has reported that you purchased these bags. Do you have those with you? So like the credit card companies are actively sharing information with Customs and Border, which is just kind of like, seems like a huge invasion of privacy. And
That's
another
really
great,
wild.
another reason why cash is genuinely wonderful, because it's like nobody needs to know that. But I kind of assumed that they did some of that stuff, but then hearing this story from her, I was like, wait, what do you mean? They just had your credit card statement. They knew what you'd been buying. And so it's like, apparently if you check as, okay, you've been flagged as leaving the country. Now you're flagged as coming back. I don't know if they just automatically pull that. Like they can just, I guess like they don't even have to subpoena it. That's just like, nope, that's just ours now. We'll take that information and see if you broke any of our stupid rules. It's kind of insane though.
And it could be one of those things where, it's like all those, the government doesn't police us anymore. They penalize companies for not policing us. You know what I mean? It's like, it's like the whole, I forget what it is, but like, if I send you over $600, I'm supposed to get all your personal information and report it to the government. It's like, no way am I doing that. And I feel like that's mostly how the general population of the United States feels. They're like, I'm never going to do that. But yeah,
because it's obnoxious, right? Like that's such a massive burden to put on anyone. Like, and that the government even needs to know about that. Like, you need to know that I'm paying some guy to like mow my lawn. No, you don't. And I'm happy to pay him cash so that you don't take a cut of that.
Totally. Yeah, but I'm just saying it could be like something where like the government goes to Amex and they're like, you knew this person bought a bag in so and so. Why didn't you tell us? Here's a fine. Like, I don't know. Not that definitely not that justifies it, but it puts the impetus on American Express or whatever credit card company to start policing purchases when people travel, which is
so that they're compliant and they can't somehow get in trouble with the government. Basically, like, see, we gave over the data you requested.
Exactly.
But it's also like, isn't it at the borders are like an interesting thing, because even as an American citizen coming back, I'm pretty sure you don't have like some of your basic rights, like your constitutional rights, are literally suspended at the border somehow. Like they can seize your phone, they can do anything just on suspicion, and they can hold you like that. I've heard a bunch of stories about people, especially like folks that are public technology figures, getting their phones taken and searched, both either coming back into America less frequently, but often if they're going into other countries, because it's like granted, you don't have your American rights when you're in another country, but you really don't have any rights at all when you're at a border. And that's kind of like a terrifying thing. Like, you really just want to be careful.
It is kind of crazy. This is a side shoot story, but I think I always tell people this story. I think it's kind of funny. When I was a kid, I was like 19. I was driving up to Canada, and I got arrested in Bar Harbor, Maine, for having a fake ID and trying to buy a beer. Maybe I was 20. Maybe I was 20 years old or something. And then when I got to the Canadian border, they were like, "We saw you just tried to buy beer in Bar Harbor," and I was like, "Yep." He's like, "What happened there?" And I was like, "They didn't let me. I wasn't old enough." And he was like, "I don't know. Like, you were kind of breaking the law." And I was like, "Yeah, but it's not the law in Canada." And the guy was like, You're right. It's not." And then they just let me through. He was like, "All right."
Wait, how did they know you'd tried to buy beer? Like, was there like a they had the police report? Like, there was already.
I did not tell them about it. They had the police report. Like, they could see the police report. I mean, this was a long time ago too. Just flagged. They look at my license or whatever.
Man, last time I was going into Canada, I was going up for a wedding, and it was myself and Carla, my lovely wife, and her parents. And I was driving, and we had, we brought some beer and alcohol with us because we're going to a wedding and like, wasn't sure how close a liquor store was going to be to the hotel. So, you want to be prepared. And we get to the border. I made sure, being slightly autistic, I made sure that I studied all of the regulations for exactly how many, like liters of wine, how many, ounces of beer you can bring without getting in trouble. And so we had literally everything exactly perfect. And we get up to the border, and the guy is asking me, okay, do you have any, beer in the car and any wine, any alcohol? And I said, yep, we sure do. We have exactly the legal limit. And he's like, oh, you know our law. You think you know our laws then? I said, oh yeah, I do. And I rattled off to him like I literally just like memorized it that morning. And so I rattled it off to him like all bright eyed and bushy tailed. And I don't think he took that very nicely. Like he thought I was being kind of a smartass maybe, but I was really just trying to let him know, like, look, I promise you, don't waste your time searching us. We are exactly compliant. And then, okay, he seems a little bit ticked off. And then he's like, well, do you have any livestock in the car? And we're like, no livestock. And we're like, okay, weird. Any chickens in the car? And I'm like, oh no, all of our chickens were murdered by raccoons last year. Which is true. Like they literally were all beheaded by a family of raccoons that last year. Have not told this guy a lie yet, being totally honest. And I think that may have been the final straw for me because he really thought I was probably being a smartass. He doesn't know that my chickens really were murdered by raccoons. And so then he gets out of his little booth, comes up to us, and he's like, pull over there. Like just, pull. And then they spent like an hour picking the car apart, looking for anything they could find. Ended up finding they had 8 different border security officers picking our car apart. Like, I don't know, it must have been a slow day, but they're just searching that thing with a fine tooth comb. And then like an hour later, they're like, okay, yep, you're free to go. And it's just like, what a massive waste of resources that was because one guy decided to get pissed off and like, swing his dick around a little bit. It's like, I don't know where I was going with that, but it was just a ridiculous experience at the border.
Government overreach.
Yeah, man. But all right. Well, now that it feels good to get some of that, like some of those border stories out of the system a little bit, just kind of cathartic.
Smuggling and
but hey, welcome.
Yeah,
it's nice for you to be here, and I wish that we could be enjoying some of your incredible cooking as we do this right now. But you're usually quite involved in that. But maybe just to start things off here, for folks that don't know you, can you just start us off with kind of who the heck are you? How did you get here today to be doing these beef-centric events that are not Bitcoin events, but are generally or often held around Bitcoin conferences? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. How the heck did you get here to be doing this?
I can tell you the brief history. I don't know that it justifies me being here doing this, but it is how I
think it does.
I think
it does.
I love doing it, and I'm honored to be part of the community and like to be cooking for all the people that come to Beefsteaks and stuff like that. I somehow just it feels like I lucked into it. There's a very much like it's like the harder you work, the luckier you get. It's like very much like right time, right place. Like I was cooking steaks, Bitcoiners like eating steaks, like that sort of thing. Like I wasn't
a match made in heaven.
I wasn't trying to figure out what Bitcoiners wanted to eat. I was just already making steaks, and Bitcoiners wanted steaks, and then it just kind of like started jiving from there. But in the early days of New York meetups, Pierre Rochard used to organize steak dinners, and like every couple months, like Seyfuddin Ammous was in town. He came and signed books and stuff like that, and we would go to like Fogo de Chão or a steakhouse. And at that time, that I was, for me going to those steak dinners, like I am such an introvert. I am very shy. It's totally exhausting for me to go to a social event. In fact, the whole reason that I cook is so that I can go to a beefsteak and not talk to anybody. Like, that is the reason that I am a chef, so that I can be antisocial at social events. Because I still like eating, I still like going out and drinking and stuff like that. And then it's it's okay for me to go visit the kitchen and just stand there in complete silence. No chef will think that it's weird. Um, but anyways, I was doing beefsteaks for normies. I was just trying to figure out a way to do it because it was like there were some beefsteaks that I went to that were kind of crappy. There are other beefsteaks that they just didn't feel like the vibe that I envisioned when I read this historical article that everybody should read at some point or another. And and so when I was trying them with normies, like the thing that happens is you bring together a bunch of strangers to uh to go to a beefsteak. I like to eat food with their hands together in a like communal environment. And that's just really challenging for some people. And there's like some people are really good at talking to strangers and some people aren't. So but it was kind of missing a tie that binds. And when you did it with Bitcoiners, so anyways, I went to Pierre and I was like, Pierre, I've been trying to do this dinner. Like I do them in my backyard. I think we should do like a small one for Bitcoiners. Like people would come over. It's just like all you know, I just gave him like the elevator pitch and he like interrupted me. He's like, cool, let's do it. Like, let's just pick a date and we'll just email me. Here's my email address. I emailed him like, and you know, the thing about like meetups at this time is when I started going to meetups, you feel like everyone had been going to meetups for a long time, but they really hadn't been going to meetups for that long. I mean, there were some things in the really early days, like Satoshi Roundtable and Baltic Honey Badger and stuff, but for the most part, a lot of people were just like lurking in the wings, reading forums and maybe trying to be funny on Twitter or maybe not. So he set up a BTC Pay server for me. I'd never heard of that. I didn't know what it was. And I was like, oh, that's been around forever, but it really hadn't been around forever. You know, it was like 7 months old or something like that. I don't know how old it was, but it was very young in those days and pretty janky, but it worked. We sold a bunch of tickets and like a bunch of people came to my house and we did a beefsteak for like 20 people. And that was 2018. It's kind of crazy. Maybe it was end of 2017. No, it was not. It was 2018. But that was wild. You know, that feels like an age ago. An age ago. Did I answer your
Time
question?
moves strange. Oh, you know, you absolutely did. I was just gonna say, time. I have only been in Bitcoin since 2020. That's when I started going down the rabbit hole. But I've noticed that time moves in this weird way when you're like paying a lot of attention to Bitcoin and the Bitcoin space. And then also, I think time maybe is even stranger for me now because I'm a father.
No, my God.
And it's like that's warping everything. Like my son's only 10 months old, but it feels like that's like it's been forever. But it's also like I feel like we just brought him home from the hospital. So time's very confusing for me right now. But I wanted to ask you. So you mentioned that this article. I need to read this too because I know it's linked on your website. But can you talk a little bit about that history? Like this, until I saw that on your website, I thought that this was something that maybe you had kind of like invented, but this was something you're going back to like this old tradition, right? Can you talk about that like old school New York beefsteak tradition? Like what the heck was that?
Yeah, so I guess in the late 1800s and early 1900s, it was like in the early days, it was totally working class, get together of men only, often in basements of buildings, where guys would just stand around a furnace in a New York City building and cook steaks in it and just eat and drink until like they couldn't stand anymore. Um, and I've never really been able to like find any evidence of this, but I have kind of a feeling that part of the reason they would happen would be because there would be some sort of bottleneck in like beef shipping, which happened out of the west side of Manhattan, like the meatpacking district. And I feel like there'd be like these days where like, say some track was broken or something, some guy would just walk out and be like, we got to eat this steak right now. And so
Sounds like a
they'd be
great
like,
day.
yeah. Yeah. So then they'd be like, get the boys, like we're going to so-and-so, we're going to the Lower East Side and we're going to eat all this steak. Like, I feel like, because otherwise it feels unusual that a bunch of guys would just eat a bunch of steak. It just it feels like, I mean, obviously it was a celebration, but then that tradition caught on and it just became more and more upscale. And it eventually became something that like a policeman would do if he was promoted to captain, or if like somebody got elected mayor, they would throw a beefsteak. Mark Twain did beefsteaks. Theodore Roosevelt did beefsteaks. Like, it became this like hoity-toity thing. And then this article was written in 1939 and went around to the different beefsteaks in New York and he talked to, there's like an East Side beefsteak and a West Side beefsteak, and they were kind of like friendly rivals, and they talked about like what each one did wrong. I mean, it was written in 1939, so it's kind of like refreshingly sexist. I don't know how else to say it. It sounds terrible to say, but it's like just like, like the ladies came in and they brought bands and crab cakes and I don't know what else. Like they blame women for ruining beefsteaks, but it's just like the progression of every event. And also something else we can talk about too, I'm interested in, and we can come back to it, is like the progression both of the beefsteak over time and just Bitcoin events in general, because it's kind of interesting to watch some things get traction at some points, and some business, some of them events are floundering. Some of them have really gotten like a hold on what they're doing and stayed true to their message, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of why it's just wild to watch.
You mean like conferences specifically? Like certain...
I guess I'm probably using these words interchangeably. I am referring to basically however the community comes together. So it could be meetups, but it could also, which are growing like exponentially in number, but it's also conferences. It's, it's events, it's satellite events like the Beefsteak. Then it's also like brick and mortar places like the Bitcoin Commons and PubKey and all that stuff. Am I losing you guys?
No. Yeah. Well, you still got me? I've still got you.
Yeah. You froze up.
Okay.
I just didn't know if you could still hear me.
Oh yeah, it may occasionally freeze because Riverside is probably not the optimal platform for live streaming, but I already paid the subscription, so I'm not about to go pay StreamYard too. But no, so that's interesting. I mean, PubKey, they are crushing it right now. I mean, it's a pretty like regardless of your politics, it's pretty cool to have a former president come into your bar. Your Bitcoin bar, not your crypto bar, your Bitcoin bar, and order burgers. Like that's a neat cultural moment. And I feel like that's, this idea of like, the third place, like, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Like the first place is home. The second place is work or school, depending on what age in your life you're at. But then the third place, and where else do humans congregate? And in America, at least, we've lost a lot of those social clubs, there's probably less of a bar scene, or there's a different bar scene now than probably there was. Now it's, I guess, depending on where you are, it's more of a club scene or whatever. It's not so much a hangout. It's something different. But I feel like Beefsteak is kind of creating one of those third places that is in location agnostic. A beefsteak can happen anywhere. PubKey is creating a third place in a very brick and mortar space, as you said.
But I think elevator
people
pitch.
Crave those. Yeah, okay, great.
Third,
you're free to take it.
You say location agnostic third place.
Yeah.
Are you sure it's not?
I think it works.
Is it third space? Third place? Third place. It sounds like bronze medal. Sounds like what you get if.
I think that it's third place, but we can say third place or third space. I mean, let's I think it's
third place
open source it. All right. Well, yeah.
Okay. I'm with it.
I'll send it to you later. Glad you like it, but I think that's a beautiful thing, right? You're creating a space where people can come together, can congregate, and the only reason people will keep coming back to that third place is if they have a good time, if they like the vibe there, and like that. Vibe curation sounds like a very kind of floofy thing to say, but it's a very real thing. Like it matters, and I know you put a lot of thought into that. But I'm
Well,
wondering,
let's
can
put
you?
you in charge of
Oh,
marketing for Beefsteaks.
I would be honored to. That would be awesome. You know,
Vibe curation. I'm writing that down right now.
well, but that's what you do, right? Because I think
Yeah, yeah,
maybe
for sure.
for people who don't know what a beefsteak is, maybe it's more helpful for you to talk about like what a beefsteak is not. Like
Yes.
because there are some, you know what I mean? Like there are some kind of rules, like unwritten rules, but then some other rules that are, I suppose, like written down, like, hey, we're not using utensils here. You're eating with your hands. You're going to
Yeah.
get messy. But like, can you talk about that? Like, what is a beefsteak not? And then what is a beefsteak?
Um, it's like it's so funny you say what a beefsteak is not, because that's always how I describe it, and that's always how I avoid describing it because it's really hard to describe what it is. It's always changing. It changes from place to place. It changes by size. Like what it is and what it's intended to be is different if it's 40 people coming and if it's 100 people coming or 200 people coming. And uh, I always like joke, like it's not a dinner, but there's food. It's not a Bitcoin event, but it's full of Bitcoiners. Like um, it it really is kind of just a vibe curation. Like hopefully you're in there. The goal is to actually, you know what, this is kind of an interesting opportunity. Like I can't remember what we were talking about, but before we got started, I have all these kind of like semi-secret policies about beefsteak. I'm just going to talk about some of them because I never talk about them. I always like want to talk about them.
Yes.
Um,
I love beef. And you know what else I love? Getting discounts on open source Bitcoin hardware. And if you also like that, go to bitbox.swiss/Walker and use the promo code Walker for 5% off the easy to use, fully open source Bitcoin only Bitbox02 hardware wallet. Then get your Bitcoin off the exchange and into your own self-custody. The Bitbox team is awesome and they build easy-to-use, secure, open-source solutions to keep your Bitcoin safe. Not only is the Bitcoin in your Bitbox safe from government confiscation, but Bitbox is also one of the only 2 wallets to actually address the dark Skippy vulnerability. So if you have a Bitbox, you are in luck. Last thing I really want to emphasize is that the Bitbox02 is easy as hell to use. Whether you are brand new to Bitcoin, it's your first time setting up a hardware wallet so you're a little bit nervous, or you are a well-seasoned psychopath. It is Bitcoin only, and again, fully open source. You can head to their GitHub and verify that for yourself. Don't trust me or Bitbox. When you go to bitbox.swiss/Walker and use the promo code Walker, not only do you get 5% off a great piece of open source Bitcoin hardware, but you also help support this show. So thank you.
so I'll tell you my first one is that I hate tiered ticketing and salespeople. So I never ever try to sell a ticket to someone. I'm like, here's the link. And everyone pays the same price. There's no like early bird price and there's no like penalty for coming in late and you didn't plan. That penalty for coming in late is like maybe that there's no more room. Um, and then it's like, uh, after that, I think that I always try to make them a little bit hard to get to. Like, like there's something about creating a barrier to entry that just, it's like putting humor in your resume. Like you put humor in your resume and then someone says to you, they're going to think you're not serious. And my response is go fuck yourself. Like I'm about to sign a contract with this company that like, we're going to agree on how valuable my time is. If you don't find value in the fact that I'm like putting humor in my resume, like I don't want to work for you. So like it's a filter for, people that don't want to make the trip out to the east side of Nashville. Like I get it. It's a pain in the ass. I don't even know if I would do it. But it also puts pressure on me to make it worth the trip. Like if somebody's going to get in a taxi and come over there, like they need to get out of the car. It needs to smell good. It needs to sound awesome. Like you need to get out and be like, hell yeah, this was worth the trip. Like just even when you're getting out of the car. And those things are super important to me, that people have those feelings and sense those senses when they walk into a beefsteak. Like they get a cocktail and they're like, oh, that's better than I thought it was going to be. That sort of thing. I put a lot of effort into every time a beefsteak is like 10 days out. I just sit down and look at all the logistics that I've lined up for the event. And I think about what the experience would be like for the person that came to that beefsteak. Like they roll up, they get out. What do they see? What do they hear? Is there music playing? Do they hear a fire? Do they see a fire? Do they smell meat? Do they see meat? Like how far do they have to walk to get a drink? Is there a line? That's another big thing. A lot of venues want to have like control alcohol consumption. And I have a like hard policy that no one should ever wait for a drink at a beefsteak, because I think waiting for a drink at an event is the worst customer experience that exists. If an event is 2 hours long and it takes 20 minutes to get a drink, I'll tell you what I do without shame. I go to the bar, I wait there. I try to get the strongest drink I can that I can nurse. I try to get as many as I can because I don't want to come back. The last thing I want to do is get up and go back to a bar. So as a result, I probably get 2 martinis, which is it's a terrible decision. Like it's like I'm really resorting to 2 martinis because I don't want to go back. So what I do is I pound the first martini because I don't want to drink a second warm martini. And then I get halfway through the second martini, I'm just like, this is too much. And then I go back to the bar and I do the same thing, but I get 2 beers or something like that. And in the end, I spend both times takes 20 minutes to get a drink. I spent 40 minutes of a 2-hour event trying to get a drink, and I had to break up conversations to do it. And I drank more than I needed to, and I probably wasted those drinks. Like, because both times I get 2 drinks, I probably set one down, or I give it to somebody, or I just drink half of it. And, so I think I think restricting drinks makes people actually get drunker. Having coolers out, of course, there's always going to be some person that like goes overboard. But I think as a whole, you go through way less alcohol with open coolers than if you had a bar with a bartender. Because then people are just like, I just want to get my drink and get out of here.
Yep.
So yeah, then I'm like going through the experience of like what it's like, like how long are there snacks out? What are the snacks? Are they delicious? Are they too filling? How long is someone going to be there between the time they arrive and the time of the first course? Is there a band playing? Are they the right vibe? Are they too loud? Like there's just all these decisions, and those are all contingent on like, what's the place? Like I keep thinking about Nashville. Like I like the band in Nashville was really cool, and it was perfect kind of Nashville band. Like it was just I think the Nashville was a great vibe. I got bum help in the kitchen. Like the food was good, but like the guys that I ended up hiring were, holy shit, you're having a Michelob Light.
Oh, I'm having a Miller Lite.
A Miller Lite. Sorry.
Technically, if you want to grab a beer right now, we can.
I'm going to go get a beer. I'm going to be right. It's going to take me a second.
Get a beer. I'm just going to talk to the live stream about the merits of Miller Lite while you're gone. I don't know if you guys can hear this. There we go. So I also was double fisting for this. I should have triple fisted in advance of this because these Miller Lights just go down so easy. And I see we have Derek Ross there in the old live stream chat. And I know Derek loves himself a Miller Lite, even though he won't say it. He likes to pretend that he probably likes some fancy IPA or something, but really Derek is a Miller Lite guy. And Derek, that's okay. I'm right there with you, brother. So, and also thank you guys for being here. And if you're liking this go ahead and share this on NOSTR. These live streams are only going to happen on NOSTR because fuck YouTube. So thanks for being here, and hope you're enjoying it so far. And if you're listening at home, feel free to grab a beer as well, depending on where you are. If you're, oh no, it's like 2:30 p.m. where I'm at. It's probably later for a lot of you if you're in Europe or elsewhere, but it's never too early to have a beer. And what did you say? Okay, what is Derek's last message here? Miller Lite disrespecter. No, Derek, you're not. You love Miller Lite. You just don't want to admit it, and that's okay. It's all right. Now the question is, am I going to need another beer? Hey, don't worry about it. I was just talking, not with Derek Ross because it's a one-sided conversation, but talking to him.
Is Derek present?
Derek is present in the audience. Hey, awesome. Derek. What beer did you go with?
I couldn't find a beer. I'm having this Never Sink whiskey.
Oh.
Made in New York.
Well, are you so at the events, typically it is a beer, and I think you recently introduced some seltzers, because those have become fairly ubiquitous these days. There's occasionally hard alcohol if people want to, I think, bring their own, people are welcome to it. Are you a beer guy yourself? Like, is that why you chose beer, or was it just that's the easiest thing to put a bunch of in a cooler and make sure everybody can get them?
Oh, a beer. So the reason I say steak and beer is just because traditionally that's what they drank.
Okay.
I do love beer. But now at most, another interesting change over time has been what alcohol consumption is at a beefsteak. Because it started out being heavy, like IPAs and porters and like fancy beers. And it's really mostly wine now. Like, huge shift over to wine.
Interesting.
And hard seltzers. I've always had hard seltzers, but a lot of times people don't crush them, I feel like hard seltzers is what people... This is what people say when they grab a drink. They're like, you know what? I'm not going to drink for a little bit. I'm just going to have a hard seltzer. When I'm going to go back to the whiskey later. That's
then I'll have a real drink.
Yeah. That's like their mentality when they reach for the hard seltzer. And I no judgment. That's kind of, I'm probably saying that because that's what I do. But yeah, we do actually this guy, Dan, really quick, backtracking to PubKey, you should get Thomas on. Thomas is awesome. I don't know if you ever...
I've gotten a chance to meet him a couple of times. Awesome dude. I've been meaning to reach out to him as well. Figured he might be a little bit busy right now with various press engagements and things, but I've been promising we're going to make it out to New York to go to PubKey in person one of these days soon.
It's awesome.
But, yeah.
He's an awesome dude, and yes, he is always busy, but he'll also just find time to just be let's drink a whiskey and talk over the air, and he'll do that, I'm sure. But the reason I was saying that is because one of the first people that helped me with Beefsteaks was this guy Dan, and Dan is like a cocktail master, and we often have really fancy cocktails at Beefsteaks because of Dan. And he's also just great at hospitality and stuff. He makes the beefsteaks way better if he's around. But I'd say that because there's often a fancy cocktail on deck somewhere at a beefsteak or two. And you just got to kind of make your way around and find them. And actually, that's another thing that I like about a beefsteak is no two people have the same beefsteak. You might have a different meal. You can drink different things. And actually, I feel like this is a good segue into talking about AI taking jobs.
Yes, let's do it.
There's something about I worked in really fancy restaurants for a while. When you work in a fancy restaurant, what happens is somebody gives you a carrot and they say to you in the meanest possible way, I need you to cut this into perfect cubes and cook them perfectly for me at a moment's notice for 12 hours a day, whatever. When you cut perfect cubes out of a carrot, you waste 50% of the carrot. And what you get is can be cool and is good, and it is the result of a lot of skilled work. But also what it ends up being is uniform. And I think that uniformity, just no matter how cool it is, ends up being dull. It's boring in the end. And like you get these really fancy places, and then like the trickle down effect of like whether or not you want to admit it, the trickle down effect of fancy restaurants perfecting food is McDonald's, because they take all the skill and science that restaurants create, high-end restaurants create, and they put it into automated food computers that make perfect French fries over and over again. And you can go to McDonald's anywhere in the world and eat the same French fry. And that is comforting. Like there's an upside to that, and I get it. And like, but the downside is that like everybody's eating the same French fry all the time, and no one's interested in trying different French fries. French fries are kind of a bad example because I feel like an unusually small percentage of French fries are actually good. But you know, it could be anything. Like I just think if you drink a cup of coffee, what's beautiful about it is that it changes throughout the course of drinking it. You know, like you take your first sip and it's hot, and maybe it tastes stronger, or maybe there's foam on top and the foam hits your lips differently. And then as you drink through it, the foam disappears and it cools down. And maybe by the end of it, you know, it's just like a little bit of a journey. Whereas if you eat like a perfectly cooked cube of anything, every bite is the same. And that's not interesting. With the exception of, obviously, if it starts out hot, it's going to cool down and it's going to be cold when you're finished with it. So I like the idea of cooking over fire a steak that maybe wasn't carved perfectly from a roast, because if you eat through that steak, like it's a journey. Like it's just like every bite's different. Maybe it's rare on one side, and maybe it's like crispy and crunchy, but overcooked on the other side. And I like that about beefsteaks, and I like creating that experience about beefsteaks where it's not like, this is your seat, this person is on your left, this person is on your right. For the next 3 hours, we're going to give you all the exact same fucking thing, and there's nothing you can do about it. And if those people suck, too bad for you. Like there's also nothing you can do about it. It's like a beefsteak, you can like move around and try different things or eat different things. Or you can just also be like, I don't want this one. I'm stuffed. I don't have room for this, or whatever the reasoning is when it comes time to, and then hopefully I eliminate all the bad decisions, and then people are left with the good decisions and can just make, you know, decide what is the best beefsteak for them while they're experiencing it.
Did you cook with just on open fire a lot prior to starting this beefsteak journey, or was that something that you started doing because you wanted to keep these beefsteaks kind of in that same traditional vein as these original ones that were happening around the turn of the century, or were you pretty adept at cooking on open fire before that?
I don't know, you know, so there's this book called Seven Fires, which I think everybody should at least like. Do people still hang out at Barnes and Noble sometimes? You should
Not
try
so much.
you should try to flip through it sometime, because it really was the first like that I know of, or at least the first one that romanticized cooking on an open fire. And it's this guy, Francis Mallman, and he's from Argentina, and he is a badass. He has a bunch of restaurants, and everyone that I've never been to one, but everyone that I know that goes to them is like, they're so good. But he always, you know, he's like an older dude. He always has some like hot 20-year-old girlfriend, and like he just like speaks like ephemerally about everything. And Um, but that really got me into it, where it's like you kind of, when you're working in high-end restaurants, a couple of things happen. You get very, there's something about, in the highest level of restaurant cooking, there's something about like you have to see, I keep doing this with my hands. Like
It's
this.
okay. I'm into it.
I'm like, when you,
Beep, beep.
when you get into restaurants, there's something about like, you need to, in order to succeed in high-end restaurants, you have to be very good at seeing what's wrong with things. Like you have to be able to fix things. But part of like maintaining that super high quality is like looking at a thing and seeing how it's flawed. And that is a form of negativity, and it's a terrible fucking way to live your life. Like, whereas like when I worked in high-end restaurants, if somebody gave me like a lopsided steak that was like burnt on one end, I'd been like, this steak is fucked. Like, bring me a steak that was cooked properly. But it's like life is fleeting, you know, like every year is different. Like if you have an apple tree, the apples are different every year. Like one year it's going to be really good and you're going to be like, this is like the best apple I've ever had. I can't wait to have it again next year. And then next year it's a different apple. You know, like you have to enjoy that apple the first time, because it might be the only time. And it's the same thing with like a lopsided burnt steak, where it's like, oh, maybe it was a really good steak. Maybe it was from a good cow or whatever. And so we're like circling this all back to AI. Like I think sometimes about, because I am also a parent, about like what jobs will AI not take? And I don't know. I don't know. Could an AI do a beefsteak? For sure, an AI could work at McDonald's. You know, like AI's like barely, like if you work at McDonald's now, really all you do is press buttons, unless you're Donald Trump. Um,
Well, you know, like, or even, I mean, take that up to something that's closer to like a fine dining. An AI can, you know, and robotics could handle a Capital Grill type steak experience where you have the
yes.
menu, you have like they've got their cooking temperature, they've got it in their manual, they've got the exact amount of time that you cook each type of meat, exactly how you treat it. It's formulaic. And when something is formulaic, you can plug that formula into some sort of robotic machine and have it
Yeah.
execute the same thing. Like it's not too hard to have a robot that is going to take that and at the certain timer flip it off, and maybe that robot even has an inbuilt temperature sensor. So it's actually a little bit better than the human at cooking that steak, because it's making sure that that steak is flipped exactly when it's supposed to, so that it's seared perfectly. But when you're like, I don't think, well, who knows? I'm no AI expert, but fire is incredibly unpredictable, like inherently. Like
Yeah.
it is literally random noise. Like it is by definition random. Like that'd be a great way to generate a Bitcoin seed phrase if you're somehow tying it to the licks of fire going up, you know, because it is random. And
Yeah.
so there's only going to be so much control that you can have on that if you're actually cooking in a traditional wood fired way. But I think the bigger thing is that experience, right? And this is, we were talking just before we went live about this a little bit, this idea that, yeah, you could have, and we're using AI in a very like general way, right? But we're talking about, some sort of automated process, non-human process that is taking care of your food preparation experience. But part of the reason that people want to go and eat certain places is not just because the food is great. It's because they love that chef. They know that chef's story.
Yeah.
They love that chef's journey that he or she has been on. They like the experience that that chef creates, the type of people that go and eat that chef's food as well. And that's something that you're just not going to be able to replicate, because that is that human quality of, this is a personal experience. Personal meaning that there is a person involved. You don't just go to eat because you want to get the most optimal food. You go to eat because you want to have an experience. It's not just shoveling calories down your gullet and okay, I'm done. It's
Yeah.
no, I want to go have an experience and I want to spend time with friends and family. Maybe I want to see that chef prepare the food right in front of me. And I want to hear the story of where that cow came from and how, this was aged and whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that AI can't replicate. And that's also like, that's a good thing. Like, and that, I don't think an AI can replicate a beefsteak. It could take all of your, it could analyze all the beefsteaks you've done, all the different ways that you cook the meat. Maybe it could figure out the grilling on fire pretty well,
But I think
with enough data, but
I don't,
it's not going
I'm
to
sorry,
replicate the experience.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
No,
this is
not at
what
all.
I think about AI. The AIs can replicate. They can
Yes.
recreate, but they can't create, right? Um,
It's
and
derivative.
it's derivative. And then like what that sort of means is like to stay ahead of AI, you have to keep creating. And then it's like, of course, I'm fascinated with this conversation. Like I went to school for art, and I'm really fascinated by like what is art and what isn't, and like what art do you like? And I agree that people, sometimes when they go to a restaurant, they're buying also the story. For sure, that's what they're doing with Francis Mallman, the Seven Fires guy. Like they're just like they want the romanticism of eating at a Francis Mallman restaurant or like Salt Bay or whoever is cool now. I don't know what the kids are watching these days. But when you look at a painting, have you ever read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by any chance?
No, but it is sitting on my shelf waiting for me to read it because I've had so many people tell me you need to read it.
It's so good. I read it as like an angsty teen, and I feel like it probably would not affect me as much now, but he talks a lot about like people seeing quality in things and how naturally you can usually just see that quality. But and it sounds like it should start with a painting, and like you look at a painting and you're like, that painting is genuinely a fucking beautiful painting. And some paintings you look at and there's like a line and a square, and you're like, oh, that's not a good painting. But you need to have this like story and art history lessons, and you need to go to like a liberal arts school for 4 years, and then you think it's a good painting. And I know that Seyfedin will never think that it's a good painting, but I personally, there's a great Tim Ferriss podcast where he talks to a guy that does, he's basically like a therapist, a famous therapist for people that are dying. And he's just like, stare at this Rothko painting until you find meaning. And it's like such an arbitrary, weird art school assignment. And I hate it. But at the same time, I'm like, there is no meaning. Like it just becomes, it's just like, you can't find it anywhere. All that is like come back to AI. I'm like, is AI can make Rothko paintings, it can like generate, but it's not making anything. It's just recreating stuff. But it doesn't, like, our human minds don't perceive that. If it's a picture we've never seen before, we think it created it. And probably it's a
Right.
picture no one has ever seen before. So there's like, it's just a semantics conversation anyways.
Well,
But I am
it's also
fascinated.
that idea, like a
Yeah,
beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? Or
absolutely.
behodler, if we're talking in Bitcoin terms. But like it is like meaning. It has the meaning that you give to it, right? It reminds me of like the assignments, like in high school, where it was like, and this was me coming from being homeschooled until high school, then getting there and doing these really stupid fucking assignments, like, oh, like what did F. Scott Fitzgerald mean by this in his book? And then you like look into it and you're like, oh, F. Scott Fitzgerald didn't mean anything by it. He was trying to make money by writing a book that people would buy. So like any meaning that you want to put in there, like all these like things that you can concoct about what is he saying about the human condition and all this, it's like that's all just a byproduct. He was just trying to write a good story. Like the meaning is what you find there. And I think that's the same with a lot of art. And
Yeah.
to a different extent with food, because I think a lot of food is like, it's interesting you went to art school because I think, I mean, like food is its own form of expression, right? Form of artistic expression that also happens to be edible and delicious, hopefully. But like
Yeah.
that's kind of a neat crossover. This is a slight digression, but when did you decide, like, did you want to be like an artist? Did you want to be a professor of art, an art critic? When did you decide I'm going to be a chef? I'm going to cook food?
It's kind of weird. I actually part of there's a couple there's a three-part answer here. It might actually just be two parts. I think the first part is that I was quickly over art critiques. Like, part of going to art school is like you stand around with everybody and you just talk and you say all this esoteric bullshit about what everybody else's paintings are. And it often, it's like, it almost feels like the origin of wokeness, because you're in this arena where you can only really comment objectively about the thing. You're not allowed to be like, this is a piece of shit. That's like just strictly forbidden, especially if it's a piece of shit. And so it's like, you can't, it's like a form of dishonesty where you're just like kind of blathering on about art. And I didn't like that. Like, there's this thing where it's like, if something has a use, can it be art? And I'm of the mindset that, like, you should be able to perceive the value or quality of a piece of art or anything you're consuming, a steak, without knowing the story. In other words, like, if a person comes to a beefsteak, they shouldn't need to know who I am. They shouldn't need to know what the thing is. They should just come. They should know what it is before they're going, obviously. But once they know what it is, they should go there and be like, oh yeah, this is awesome. And then I got over that at art school quickly. And the second part of it was like, when you were in art school, you work on projects for months at a time, and sometimes they suck at the end of it. And that was hard for me to do, and still is hard for me to do. When you're cooking, when you go into a restaurant, a nice restaurant or even a shitty restaurant, you do the same art project every day over and over again. And no matter how shitty it is today, you get to wake up tomorrow and go back and do it again. So, like, you get better. It's like you go to a restaurant and you're like, when I worked at Gramercy Tavern, we did this dish that was like a crepe with crab and carrots in it. And that was the perfectly cut cubes, and like it had this carrot reduction sauce over what, it's like, it was simple and it was hard to execute well, but it was fucking really good when it was done perfectly. And it took me a long time to get good at doing it. Like, I just had to do it over and over again. And then there's no way there's no way it crosses over in the Venn diagram of, like, is it food? Is it art? There's no way it crosses over into art the first time you make it. You have to make it 500 times before it starts to become like, oh, you see all the really minute details that can change, and you kind of hone in on the things that are nicer about it, and you just make it more beautifully, and hopefully it's more delicious. So restaurants gave me an escape from the arbitrary, esoteric conversations of art school, and it gave me, like, a more rapid fire way to create, is not the right word, but just like do something with my hands and complete it. And then you're done at the end of every day, you're done. Like, there's no, like, project that you have to wake up and face the next day. You just got to go back and do the same thing over and over again.
I suppose it's also like the feedback you're getting is inherently, like, brutally honest. It's like, did the person eating there, did they like the food or did they not like the food? And obviously everybody's tastes are different, but you're getting this feedback day after day in real time. It's not people, blowing smoke up your ass about, oh, well, I really liked the way that you made a painting that was just black and white and it's two circles. And I think that was really talking about the plight of the modern man as he struggles with his own masculinity. No, it's just like, yeah, that was a really good steak. I liked it a lot. I would eat that steak again. I enjoyed it. I had a good time. Like it's much more real. It's
Yeah.
and quite literally, tangible and goes into your
it's also
body. Like
functional.
it, yeah.
It's also function exactly like it's putting something into your body because you get hungry. You don't get hungry to consume Rothko. Like you get hungry to put something in your belly, and that kind of makes it just in and of that quality. I feel like that makes it hard to make food art. I didn't really finish that statement earlier. It's like if you can use something, is it art or is it design? And are you an artist or are you a craftsperson if you're making something that's used? And the example is like a flight of stairs. If there's nothing at the top of a flight of stairs, it can be a piece of art. And there's actually like a website dedicated to this, like stairs that lead nowhere. And and it's kind of an interesting idea because you're like, right now the stairs are useless. Like it's just like, why would anyone walk up them? So all you can do is look at them and like think about it. And but like the second there's like a door at the top of the stairs, you're like, oh, those are well designed stairs, but they're not art anymore because you can use them. That's kind of like how I think about uh art and usefulness and whether or not something is art or design. And there's obviously overlap there, but
So
I
you wouldn't call yourself a meat artist, for example.
I would not for sure. And
It
actually,
also meat artist sounds kind of questionable too. Like when you hear that, like just
no,
out of context, it sounds a little bit weird. So yeah.
no, I used to be on my Grinder profile. Yeah. The I think the other thing that's another thing about the usefulness of I really am anti the fancy restaurants put this into me, but I'm very anti food waste. And a lot of times people want to do things like throw steaks at each other and like they want to have like eating contests and stuff like that. And I really don't like that stuff. Like I don't like if you actually, because it's like the opposite end of the spectrum. Like if you want food to be art, it's by necessity wasting it. And I fucking hate that. I hate wasting food. Especially if it's an animal. Like, I don't know if you've ever gone hunting or anything like that. I had not
I
actually,
have.
yeah. So like, it's one part of the reason the way I started cooking was I was a vegan in high school and my mom was like, cool, but I'm not making vegan food all the time. So like, we'll give you some money and you can like cook for yourself, but I'm not like, I'm not making vegan food. And like, bless her heart, like that was the right thing to do. For a while, I just sauteed bell peppers in ketchup, and I still have a soft spot in my heart for ketchup peppers, but it set me on the path to being like, you can make more delicious food. And then like then like you get like a pork chop. And what happened when I started working in New York is they bring like, you're like, oh, a pork chop. Like it's kind of easy to waste a pork chop. But then in Italy, or I worked in Italy, then I came back and I worked in a restaurant and they bring like a half a pig in. And when they bring a half a pig in and you got to cut it up and, saw pork chops and like set aside the trotters and whatever, it's harder to waste that stuff. It's hard to like cut a bunch of skin off and just toss it away. You're like, can we make cracklins? Like, what could we do with this? Yes, it's a lot of more work, but it sucks to waste the animal.
Yeah.
And that's where you like get away. It's romantic to use every part of the pig. A lot of people don't want to do it, but it's not an art, it's definitely a craft. And you need to learn it. You need to learn it from an old, grumpy, conservative dude.
Yeah. I remember the first time I went deer hunting with my dad. I think I was maybe, I don't know, like 12 years old or so.
Yep.
And like first deer I shot, I was actually with a shotgun shooting slugs in southern Minnesota, because you need to shoot slugs down there because it's farmland and don't want your a stray rifle bullet going too far. So you shoot slugs. And I still remember that first deer that I killed. It was a very young little buck. But I remember my dad starting to field dress it and having me do it with him. And like without getting too graphic for anyone listening, the moment you need to cut the asshole and balls out of a deer in the field and then cut up its guts, pull all those guts out and clean that thing up and then drag that for a considerable distance, you gain a new respect for that animal because it is quite an intimate thing to do. And that was the first thing my dad said, is that we got to thank this animal and we're going to use every bit of it that we possibly can. And I think that that's because our society is so full of waste now.
Hardcore.
It's insane. And it's, I think when you're talking about like waste is bad enough just in a general sense, but about with animals specifically, it's like that may not be a sentient being, right? But that is still a living thing. And if you are going to kill that thing and eat it, you should respect it by using as much of it as you can.
Yeah.
And I'm curious with beefsteaks, this is kind of a specific question, but I'm just very curious. How do you actually pick the kind of the cuts of meat that you're going to do? And do you work with any of the kind of like, Bitcoin ranchers that are out there too, that are, selling beef for Bitcoin? How does that just kind of like nuts and bolts logistics actually work of getting ready for an event?
The answer is always, it depends. I definitely will always buy Bitcoin from ranchers when I can, buy beef from ranchers with Bitcoin when I can. I think that my family were beef farmers in Missouri, back in the day. I love supporting ranchers. I think, as with any like real argument or conversation, it's like it's more nuanced than you want for it to be. Like everybody's like, I could just give you a half a cow to do at a beefsteak, and like that actually, as romantic as it sounds, wouldn't really work unless I had like 10 days to like take it apart and cook everything and cure things, and like I really can only do steaks. That's not entirely true. Like obviously I do other things, but I need to go in and be able to get like 100 pounds of flank steak, and it's hard for a lot of ranchers to do that. So I can't always do it. Cole in Austin is awesome. His beef is delicious. He can usually come pretty close to that with enough advance notice. And yeah, I haven't done one in Austin for a while, but when I do, I try to like let him know and go through him. But I usually try to go through meat purveyors, and there are like, you can still get really good meat. And then obviously when it's smaller, if a beefsteak is going to be 30 or 40 people, I can go like the one we do in Riga, Latvia. There's this woman in Estonia who's like 6th generation cattle rancher, butcher store in this small town in Estonia. This guy lives there, and he like, I just email her and like tell her what I want, and they butcher the cow in advance, and he drives it down to Riga for me. And so that usually does come from 1 or 2 cows, and she sends me the pictures, and like it's expensive, but the meat is really good. And like you said, the story is cool. Like you get to see pictures of the cows in the field and like the story of her family business and all that stuff. And then also just in Riga, the food is just, Riga beefsteak is one of my, somebody on Twitter or something somewhere, maybe even messaged me, was like, what's your favorite beefsteak? There's no real answer to that because I think they're all totally different. But the one in Riga is special. And it's because I think Riga is a really special. Have you been to the Riga conference ever?
I have not, and it kills me because I've heard it's quite a special experience.
It's really cool, and I think part of it is like goes back to like it's kind of a pain in the ass to get there, and it just puts up a wall for anybody that won't lay over. And it is like the flights are terrible. Like you either have like a 25-minute layover in Oslo, or you lay over for like 2 days or something like that. Like there's no like hour and a half layover. You have to always sprint to your next plane, coming and going. And Yeah, I don't know. It's always a shit show. My travel's always messed up getting there, but I always have the best time there. I love that. I love that. Um, did I answer your question? You said, oh
Oh
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, you absolutely did. And I'm curious, do you have another specific question? But do you have a favorite cut yourself? Like if you had to, you get to have one cut to have for dinner tonight, and or maybe I should make it like you have to have one cut for the rest of your life. This is obviously a hypothetical, but I'm curious, like what part do you really love?
I think the the answer is ribeye. I think if
Hmm.
I partly because like if I was eating ribeye for the rest of my life, it's technically two muscles that are kind of good eaten. They're pretty forgiving. The ribeye is pretty forgiving. Like if you get a strip steak and you cook that just a little bit too much, that thing is trash. I hate overcooked strip steak. Um, Going back to like the imperfect steak, there is no imperfect strip steak. It's great or it's trash. Like it just crosses that line. It's done. I really think flat iron steak is way underrated. I think it's really tasty. It's really forgiving. Um, and it's cheap. Like it's like you can kind of get it anywhere. It's part of the shoulder. You can make stews out of it, or you can cook it as a medium rare steak, and it's great both ways. If you make a stew out of a ribeye, it's kind of not that great. It's obviously super wasteful money wise, but like you could still do it.
Yeah. It would that be your like most under not the ribeye, but would that be your most underrated cut of steak, or do you have another cut that you think like people don't use enough that is actually like very good and maybe more economical?
I think it's probably the most underrated, but still available. You know, like because I could say something like a Denver steak, but if you go to your local grocery store and be like, "Cut me some Denver steaks," he's gonna be like, "I don't know what the fuck you're talking about." Next, but he
Yeah.
should know what a flat iron is, or it's called a minute steak. Sometimes if it's cut across the thing, there's like a big piece of connective tissue going down. Dude, can I ask you some questions?
Sure, man.
How are we
It's
on
an
time?
open format. I'm solid on time here. If you've got, do you
No,
have
no,
another
no. I have no
15, 20?
I have no time constraints. I have no time
Oh,
constraints.
sweet. Well, then we're rolling.
Um,
But yeah,
I listened to this. I listened to it was Michael Malice and Dave Smith talking,
mm,
and it was around the time that I bet you I was listening to it while you and I were texting, and
nice.
and Dave Smith was talking about because the reason I say that is because I was like, oh, I want to talk to Walker about this. Dave Smith was talking about like coming up with jokes and how when you come up with a joke, you really don't know, with a few exceptions, you don't know how it's going to be received. And like, he's like, if I come up with 100 jokes, two of them I'll be like, oh, these are going to be killers. And then they are killers. And then like, there's 30 of them where I'm like, these are going to be great. And maybe 10 of them are great. And then the rest, you're like, okay, these are shitty. I should never do this. Um, and I feel that way about my own tweets. Like the tweets that I think are my best tweets, they all have like 2 likes, like just, it's always that way. I just like, uh, but I'm curious when you're doing podcasts, do you feel like you have an idea of how it's going to be received when it's done? I guess it's also a process. Like, do you have an idea when you're done? Do you have an idea of how you think it will be received, and then how correct are you in that idea?
Yes, and usually pretty correct. I can tell you right now that this is going to be received well, and will be listened to a lot, like relative to other episodes, because I think that like this has not to make this too formulaic, but this has a lot of things that people want, which is
Yeah,
somebody who is very beloved by the community, you, something that is Bitcoin related, but not specifically Bitcoin, because sometimes people honestly just get burnt out by just like you can only hear that the dollar is going to collapse and the
totally.
Fed's going to print money. Like you can only hear that so many times. It's like, we get it. I know. And like, yes, it's nice. And, or hearing, like I hate Bitcoin price predictions. I should say I have a love-hate relationship with them because it's like, I find that to be mostly noise. But like, that is some like that's the kind of stuff that does well like on YouTube because you put a headline with me going like, oh, with a big O face, and like you won't believe this insane prediction from Michael Saylor, and then that the algorithm picks that up because people apparently like that kind of stuff on YouTube. But like that's why I genuinely like I don't look at YouTube when it comes to how my show is received. I look at just the RSS downloads. Like what are the actual podcast downloads? Because I think that's a little bit truer. It's not as algorithmically driven. It's like somebody decided, oh yeah, I want to listen to this, not just like the YouTube algorithm threw this to me, and so I'm gonna click on it and watch it. But yeah, well, I'm curious. Do you have that with that same question with your food, like with a beefsteak, or do you know like?
Say I have it with dishes. Like I'll do these dishes, and it's not even. There's actually a couple sides to it. Part of it is when you're actually, I'll just give this in because in restaurants, no one realizes how important menu writing is. And when you think about like sometimes you go to a restaurant and you see 8 things on a menu and you're like, I would like to order one of everything, please. And then there's another time when you sit down at a restaurant and you're like, I don't know what to get. Like, what do you have? Like, what are you having? Like, when you ask someone like, what are you having? It's like a sign that they are not great at menu writing. But I'll have things on a menu in a restaurant. I'm just like, this is so good. Like, why are people, you just like switch 2 words and it's just like the next line, it's the most popular thing on the menu. And something about how it hits the brain at the table just like cranks. And then I think the other thing is like just the functionality of a dish. Like if I make a beefsteak course, there's so many times where I'm like, or at the end of the night of a beefsteak, I'll be like, this one thing was really good tonight. And other people will be like, that was the best. Like no one ever mentions the thing that I thought was the best one. Really? They always talk about other things. And actually, I that is almost 100% of the time. Like really? The thing that I was the most excited about is almost never the thing that people are mentioned to me later.
What's the thing that makes you the most excited about it? Like how do you determine like out of these 7 different courses that you delivered, how do you determine like which one that you are the most stoked about? Is it just like is it something technical in the preparation side? Is it just you tasted it afterwards and that's the one that you thought tasted the best? Or how do you judge that personally?
That's a good question. I think it goes back to the whole Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Because the whole thing about that book is like the guy is just pursuing quality. He's like looking for quality and trying to define the word, and he basically goes crazy trying to define it. But he talks about how like quality when you see it, and different people get better at seeing different types of quality. Like mathematicians can look at a mathematical equation and be like, that's a beautiful equation. And he talks about working on a motorcycle, and he talks about how simple whatever his Harley Davidson is and how, whatever. So that is all that is to say is like, the best beefsteak course is the one that speaks to your tongue. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter how pretty it is. It doesn't matter like the story of the steak. All that shit goes out the window when you take a bite. Like the only thing that matters is you just go, oh man, that's really good. And so few of the things that we eat are truly delicious. You know what I mean? And you really have to be paying attention because you can miss it. You can miss it. And it might not be there not only next week, like once it's gone, like once people finish it, like, can I have more? They're like, it's gone. No, you can't. There's nothing, like I can't make it again. So that's the thing where I'm like, that's where those are my favorite beefsteak dishes that you just put in your mouth and there's, for whatever reason, you just know immediately that it's delicious.
It's surprising to me though, that like like you said, almost always whatever you're hearing from people at the end of the night that was their favorite one is not the one you would have picked. I mean, do you think that just comes down to like not to sound like hoity-toity, but do you just have like a more refined palate? And so you are like, and you're judging your own creation more harshly. Is that part of it, do you think?
I don't think I have a more refined palate. I'm probably looking for more high-end notes, like I'm thinking more about like what's the texture, what's the acid level of the dish, like are there crunchy things in there? Is there a pickled thing on top? Like is there some sort of hit of salt that comes at the beginning or the end? Like what is the arc of the bite once it's in your mouth? I probably think about that more. Because like, if there's an olive in there and like you miss it and then you hit the olive and you're like, oh, it's like a little salty pop there. It's like, I'm probably paying more attention to that stuff. I don't know if I'd call that refined, but I am looking for it more because I think refined or not, you still notice those things, and maybe that's the other part of that discussion is like, you do get better at delivering things that people automatically think is delicious. Like you get better at it. And maybe that's the art, like maybe the art is, giving quality to people more consistently and higher quality over time, hopefully. Hold on. I have another podcast question for you.
Oh, okay. Love it.
I am curious about, I did in warm up for this episode, I listened to some of your podcast episodes. I don't listen to many Bitcoin podcasts anymore, I will admit, because I have like just limited my intake to, I cut all news out of my life, which I think is a great thing. I am not going to vote this year, which I have never done before, but it has let me be more unbiased, I guess. Like I don't have a team anymore. I'm politically homeless. And I was never like hardcore one way or the other, but I can't handle the political teams. And so anyways, in listening to warm up to this, God, I totally sidetracked myself there. I don't remember what I was talking. Anyways, I was going to ask you kind of like what your thought process was. Oh, you were talking on one of your episodes about doing short form content with Carla and getting some sponsors and stuff like that, and going in and out of that stuff. And then like you've started this podcast, and you said something like, it's an opportunity to talk to people. And actually, I would say like I'm obviously having a great time. I'm sipping on whiskey. I haven't had like, I know you, I consider you a buddy, but we haven't had like a night out. You know what I mean? Like we haven't like dinner and just like chilled out and had a beer, like, which is kind of where you cross over and you can like develop like a rapport with the person, but also just become friends and talk about shit that no one's listening to.
Yeah.
and then, so I'm curious, like why you are making that longer form podcast, which I like. I love that you're doing it. I respect you for doing it. And then like, is there a goal? How do you get in? Like, what's your process? Stuff like that.
Well, first of all, I would of course much prefer a off the mic, nice dinner and subsequent drinks, with you to a on the mic conversation, especially separated by great distance.
We'll do that.
But that, you know what? It's a date. That sounds like a blast. But no, like what I had said, I think I've said it a couple of times because it very much is true. Like I started this show because I like talking to Bitcoiners. Like I've met some really amazing people because of Bitcoin. I've met, you because of Bitcoin. I attended, I think I've got 3 beefsteaks under my belt now. That's because I don't think I would have heard about that if I wasn't, running in these Bitcoin circles. So like, and I've met great people at Beefsteak too, that you're throwing meat down your gullet together and having a great time. And like, it's just such an incredible melting pot. But I do, I still have a fiat job, still mine fiat, as they say. And so for me, this podcast is not a money making endeavor. I'm lucky to have a very great sponsor, Bitbox. who has supported this show from early on, and I'm very grateful for that. Because it is nice. There are certain costs associated with it. For example, like, getting a nice microphone and things like that. But I would do this even if nobody was sponsoring this show, because I think that, as I know there's the meme like, oh, there's too many Bitcoin podcasts. I think we need as many Bitcoin podcasts and more as there are TradFi podcasts. Like, we need to sink that TradFi ship by overwhelming it with a flood of Bitcoin podcasts. But not just specifically about Bitcoin or number go up. I think the FGU, the freedom go up part of that, is a really like a more important and more interesting part of the conversation. I also think just talking to people whose lives have changed because of things they started doing around Bitcoin, but not talking specifically about Bitcoin like we're doing here today. Like,
yeah, I mean, we've barely talked about Bitcoin.
Exactly, because we don't necessarily need to, right?
Yeah.
And I think that part of I think it's very powerful for people to come to Bitcoin, not just because they heard some podcast where all the technical details of Bitcoin were elaborated upon in great detail, but because they heard a story about somebody who was doing something kind of related to Bitcoin, and they liked that person, they liked that idea, and they liked whatever they were doing with their life, and it inspired them in some way, or maybe it made them hungry for a nice steak. I don't know. But
Yeah.
I think that those conversations are really useful for people to have and important. And so, yeah, my end goal with this show, no end goal. Just keep on doing it, whether it's sponsored or not. Because like for me, like I don't watch sports. So you figure any time that I would spend watching sports and caring about sports, I just figure I dedicate that to Bitcoin and making a podcast. And if a few people listen to it and get value from it, that's enough for me. And again, it gives me an opportunity, a great excuse to chat in a longer form setting with folks like you. I would love to do these things in person, like more so. But with the little guy right now, travel is low on the priority list. But yeah, I'll take that date at PubKey any day.
This is a good stepping stone way to do it, though. Like you get this like foundation on these first episodes, and then like when he gets older and it's easier to move around, and before he starts school, like you can get out there and maybe people can come to you more, but also like you'll get around and get to some. Get some. But I'm seeing you guys listed on conferences coming up. Are you guys going to travel? And actually, you know what? This is probably personal conference. We don't have to go there.
No, that's okay. I can say it just because it's completely public. We're going to be in El Salvador in January for the Plan B El Salvador conference. So they have the Plan B in Lugano. We emceed that for the inaugural one 2 years ago now, and they run a really great show. And they're doing one in El Salvador. We haven't been back to El Salvador since 2022. And so I'm honestly stoked to get back there. Have you been down?
I haven't been.
Wait, you have not been yet?
Yeah, I haven't been.
I've had some good beef in El Salvador, I'll say.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. It's a cool country. I don't know. It's an inspiring place too, because you see a lot of people very hopeful, and that's something that I think we need more of in this world. Like people that are generally just like stoked about the future. Like, wow, things are getting better. Life is much better than it was a year ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago. Like that's that kind of optimism is really contagious, I think. And so it's cool to go down there. I'm excited to go back. Are you doing any more beefsteaks this year?
I was kind of like aligning this year. Am I doing more beefsteaks? Nothing public.
Okay.
I do some private events, like I do some for Bitcoin companies, and then I do them for like, sometimes people will be like, I want to do it for my rehearsal dinner or something like that.
That's an awesome rehearsal dinner. That's
yeah, I think so. I would like rehearsal dinner, or even a wedding dinner. People will do. So I have some stuff like that that's like private, not on the open thing. But I don't know, my open one like this next year, the Bitcoin conference in Las Vegas. I don't love Las Vegas. You guys lived in Las Vegas for a second, right?
We lived in Las Vegas. We were going to move there. We lived there for like 5-6 months, just like doing a long-term Airbnb thing. And then Carla got pregnant.
Wait, you guys have like a crazy Airbnb story?
Oh God. Yeah, it was, It was
I forgot
gnarly.
about that.
You know, honestly though, it was a great example of like going viral on social media actually leading to a meaningful resolution to something, because like I think like we had multiple people reach out and be like, I know somebody like high up at Airbnb. Let me like, because the video went like really viral, because Carla's very good at making
Can
engaging
you
short form content, right?
can
You
you
know.
remind me what happened? It was it like a flood or something? Like
No, well, first let's just say the one thing was the house was not as advertised, which would have been fine if we weren't like paying a substantial amount for it. Like it was a lot of fiat that could have gone towards Sats. But the house looked very nice on the pictures, not so much when you got there. The other thing was like they were doing basically like full ripping out all of the roads around this house and doing like
hmm,
really like heavy machinery work
that's right. Yeah,
for
yeah, yeah.
like it would have been like for the next 6 months, and we were like, well, this is, it would have been nice to know about that, because there's like jackhammers all day every day nonstop, and we've got a barky little dog. Like this is not a good situation. Yeah, and then basically they would like not refund or do anything like that. But so we were like, screw it, we'll just eat this massive cost. We'll book a new place. The new place was lovely. But they ended up refunding us. Actually, like, good on them. I mean, probably if we wouldn't have gone viral, they wouldn't have refunded it, but
Yeah.
they did. So like, I've got to give them credit. So that was nice. And then they gave us a little extra like bonus on top, because they were like, we feel really bad about this. It's like, okay, sure you do. You guys just got called out very publicly, and you want to make amends for this. Like, I get that, but if we didn't have that audience or that platform, I think we would have just been shit out of luck. But
Yeah.
grateful we did. I mean, it's like one of those things where it's beneficial to be able to, or to have a large social platform, whether it's X or on NOSTR, probably better on NOSTR because you can't potentially get booted off of there. But like us small folks, us plebs, can actually have an outsized voice these
Yeah.
days. And like you see that legacy media platforms, like I'm so sick and tired of all the election stuff, because it's just all just such blatant propaganda. And it's like I can't wait for the election to be over so that we can, go back to complaining about whoever won, and then, in 3 more years start up this whole election racket again. That's the thing. It's like there's no break from it. I think you did the right thing just fully tuning it out. It's like a car crash. I kind of like love, like, there's like a sick joy in watching this chaos. Like, I don't actually like watching car crashes, but just the analogy.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
I'll tell you I told you before we started, like, I lived in the city before and now I live in the country. And this is probably partly from, like, one of my habits is, like, every Friday I take, like, microdose mushrooms and hike in the
Nice.
woods with my dog. And if the season is right, I'm mushroom hunting, and I just kind of go on like a unlimited hike. Not like I go like really far into the woods, but I go out there with like not necessarily a time to come back. Um, and that has been so peaceful for me, and it has highlighted my own vulnerabilities to just algorithms, and how having Noster that has no algorithm to me is like a walk in the woods. And going back and looking at Twitter is like going back to New York City and, just seeing a homeless guy on the street, which is tragic. And I don't think that should exist, but it's terrible to see, and you can't look away. And Twitter knows that. Like, it continually feeds you the things you can't stop looking at. Like, that's the whole purpose of it. And if a human tendency is to look at things we don't want to see, then the end result of looking at Twitter is that you're going to be unhappy. And I don't know how else. I don't know how else to like say it. It just feels like a good reason to take Twitter breaks. And the whole political thing is like the prime example of all that stuff. It's a hard
That's a
road to
really
go.
good analogy, by the way. Like, I like that. Like, Nostra's it's a walk in the woods versus the centralized platforms are a trip into the heart of a city. Like, it is. I mean, just stimulation wise
Yeah,
as well. Like,
it's hard on
it's
your
just so many. Yeah, and like our attention is very limited. That's like just you start to like, I'm a new dad. And so you start to realize it's like, you have a lot less time that you can just excuse by like wasting it just doom scrolling, right? Because it's like,
Yeah.
well, why am I doing that instead of playing with my son,
Well,
right? Like that would be insane of me to do that, right? Like, and what a waste of my precious attention that I could be spending on my wonderful offspring or my beautiful wife. Like, shame on me, you know?
that's just it. It's like the consequences. I do this with food. Once you have kids, it's the ultimate, they're the ultimate responsibility, and the consequences of your decision are theirs. And they can't decide. Like, your decisions are their decisions. If you look at Twitter and it turns you into a grumpy asshole and then you're a bad dad as a result, then like, that's a bad outcome of looking at Twitter. And I do think that that happens. I think that like social media, Facebook, makes people angry. And then they turn around and then they take their anger out on people around them for whatever they're seeing from an algorithm on an app. And that's where like real world consequences of shit like Twitter algorithms come into play. Like it makes people bad parents. It makes it's a lower quality of life, and it's sad all around. Like if you can succeed at separating yourself from it, which I'm not saying I have done. I still look at Twitter sometimes. Like, I go down that thing, but when I do it, I'm like, oh, oh, how did I do that for 2 hours? And I feel terrible now. And then I can't sleep. And then I'm like, I really should not do that anymore.
It is insane. Like the actual, like the physiological effect of something like any social media. Like, I don't use TikTok, but I imagine that is probably even worse because it's just video content. Their algorithm is like very, very good. Clearly, that's why it's been so successful as an app, because it keeps people just planted there, just nonstop. And it's like, I don't know.
It's precision.
It feels good for a second, right? But then, sorry, what'd you say?
It's precision dopamine. But the thing about it is, it doesn't even feel good for a second. It feels good for a fraction of a second, but you can keep getting that fraction of a second over and over again as long as you want. And it's like, that is crazy. That's like more crazy than any drug. It's insane.
Slight tangent, but speaking of fatherhood, what do you cook at home? Do you cook a lot of are you carnivore, or are you?
Yeah. Going back to what a beefsteak is not, a beefsteak is also not a carnivore event. Contrary to popular belief. I like to do vegetables and fish and other animals and stuff like that. I am not a carnivore. I've done hardcore ketogenic diet stuff. I feel like that I did that kind of relatively early. I feel like that really got side railed by like labels. Like you go to Costco and you're like, here are these keto snacks, and none of them they all actually have a bunch of carbs in them.
Yep.
And like if you're eating carbs while you think you're doing the ketogenic diet, you're really just eating the American diet, which is like eating lots of fat and carbs. And so that's a long-winded answer of no, I'm not a carnivore. Beefsteaks are not a carnivore events.
Yeah.
And I've had
Vegans are welcome.
They
just might have trouble finding something to eat, but they are welcome, right?
I will say this, to date, 5 vegans have come to Beefsteaks and left meat eaters.
Really?
And yeah. And there have been other vegetarians have come, but they've stayed vegetarians. It's the vegans that you get.
Do you think it's that they get around those smells and they literally like cannot help themselves? It's like, oh boy, I need some of this. Like, my body is telling me I need it.
That's a good question. I don't know. Part of the reason that I stopped being a vegan was because I started getting headaches from B12 deficiency, and just eating like a piece of fish once a week made me feel it was like a world of difference for me. It is like, Who knows? Yeah, who knows? I didn't want to get into like talking about diets because it's just like I'm not ever encouraging. The only thing I want is delicious when I'm shopping for food. Like I want to support ranchers, I want all that stuff, but the main thing I want is delicious because I want that bite when it's in your mouth to be really good. And you asked you're talking about cooking. Yes, I do cook at home a ton. Um, we have one kid that is a good eater and will eat a bunch of stuff, and we have another kid that is a picky eater, and then my wife is pescatarian.
Okay.
So it's like you got to kind of thread those needles of, like hitting all those things. So we kind of have like a little bit of a rotation that we go with. You get like a pantry going, and you're like every once in a while we branch out and do something weird. We actually did. Have you ever had like Chinese hot pot? We actually did that this
Oh,
past weekend.
Carla and I have hot pot at least once a week.
Oh,
We have multiple of our own hot pots.
you do it
So
at home. Oh, that's awesome.
we do it at home. We go out for it. Like any city we're in, we try to find a hot pot place, and you can usually find one, and it's
Yeah,
usually fantastic. And like sometimes there's small little hole in the walls. Other times they're like larger chain type places, but
yeah,
it's always good. And it's talk about just like a wonderful dining experience. Like it's fun to bring somebody to their first time having hot pot too, because you're like a little bit nervous. You're like, okay, I'm like dipping this stuff in myself,
yeah.
but it's great.
You have to be present. Have to be
Yeah.
present. There's some study. I like read it and I can't go back and I can't find it, but it's basically compares food memories of people at very fancy restaurants to shared meals. And basically the study kind of like it was like they would go to a fancy meal and ask them like 4 days later, like, what did you have at this 3-star restaurant the other night? People would be like, I don't know, I had this thing in a martini glass and it was like jello-y and there was cream on top. Like they can't remember what they had. But if you go to a family style restaurant where you share everything, they remember the food really well. Be like, oh, they had this pasta with broccoli and sausage that was a little bit spicy, and then they had this Caesar salad that had like extra croutons, and they put these anchovies on top. Those anchovies were, like they just really remember the meals. People remember meals they share, and they forget plated meals, which is another kind of like thing about the beefsteak is like hopefully, and hot pot, like you have to be present. There's no way to like absent-mindedly eat hot pot. You have to be present to eat it.
But beefsteak, we know another thing I like. So like it's usually like a no. I don't know if this is an explicit rule, but it's at least at the ones. It's like a no photo kind of environment. Like don't
Yeah.
like hey, there are people here who don't want their photo taken at all. Like especially you're around a lot of Bitcoiners who may be NIMS. Like you're being respectful of that, which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
I think but the other great side effect of that kind of policy is people aren't just out staring, like having their phone out because they're going to take a picture soon of something that comes out so they can post it. But when you take that away from them, and it's like, then they're not just having their phone in their hand the whole time. Like it again, because you're eating with your hands, you're getting messy at a beefsteak. That
Yeah.
is bringing it to be present. Was that always the case? Like, hey, no pictures, or was that something you kind of developed later
I
on
think
to curate?
we did it it was more hardcore in the very beginning. Part of what started that is just going to New York Bit Devs. They're pretty hardcore about no photos at New York Bit Devs, and they'll pounce on you. Like if some guy pulls out their photo and like some pulls out their phone and takes a photo or tries to take a video, they'll be like, no photos, please. Can you please delete that? Like, like they'll get on you about it. And I think that I am a big believer in privacy. I think it's important. And I think that the thing that people who are not concerned about privacy take for granted is that when they aren't private, they also compromise the privacy of the people around them. And so when you come to a beefsteak or any Bitcoin event, you're responsible for everyone's privacy. And so there needs to be like a lowest common denominator. And I think one of those is just don't take pictures. Like, don't take pictures with 10 people in the background. And of course, people take pictures. I actually have a note. The rule is no pictures without consent. And that means, like, specifically, no one can be in that picture that doesn't know they're in that picture. And then I also ask not to post media about it and stuff like that. But then, like, there is all these, like, side effect benefits of that rule that people have to be present and you're not looking at your phone. And I just, like, I remember watching the Super Bowl a couple years ago, and, like, when all those guys come out and they give each other high fives, a lot of them have their phones out and they're videotaping. And that just struck me as, like, the craziest thing in the world. You're at the most filmed event in human history. And you have the opportunity to be present, and your choice is to pull out your phone and experience it through a screen. Like, it's so crazy to me. It's so crazy to me. And like 50% of the players like pull out their phones and they like videotape each other. And I'm just like, guys, someone is already taping this. You can just be present. Like, you can get all the footage you want from this event of you standing there high-fiving your friend. It's just so crazy. I mean, I see it. I have those instincts sometimes, but I don't. It was very striking to me watching that.
It's a freeing thing to put your phone away, especially when you are around people. Like when you are around friends, family, it is a very freeing thing to be like, you know what? I'm doing the most important thing I could be doing right at this moment. And so I don't need my phone, right? Like there's no reason that I need it. I'm already doing exactly what I want to be doing at this moment in space and time. And you will not fully, like, you cannot be fully present if you are constantly on your phone. Like it's not possible, right? It is sucking your attention away. Like you can't concentrate on two things at once and still have the same level of attention. It's just not going to happen. And that's, I think, like, again, it's really interesting to me, this kind of, I don't know, almost like legend of the beefsteak that you've been able to create, where, like, as you said, you're not doing any fancy marketing. You're not you're not going around trying to show this to everyone. It's like, here's the link, whoever signs up can sign up. They always sell out, I'm pretty sure. Like, there's never an issue with attendance. Like, it's usually the opposite issue of probably you have people hitting you up saying, hey, is there any extra room? And you're like, nah, the tickets are the tickets. But, like, this is very opposite of most experiences that people have, because most experiences are pushed on them repeatedly until they finally, like, okay, I'll do it. This is like, maybe that's part of that self-selection that you mentioned of making it tough to get to. It's like, you're not pushing this on people. Whoever wants to be there is going to find a way to get there. But I think that it's very unique, especially in this day and age, to have that kind of experience, because it's not like, exclusive in the sense that, you're not like turning a bunch of people away, like, no, sorry, you're not on my list of preferred people, unless maybe it's a smaller event. But like, it's like, here's an event, you can come to it. If you don't, that's fine. But you've developed, I mean, like, there's basically like a subculture of Bitcoiners, which are just like beefsteak groupies. And I say this about men and women. And having been to a few of them, I know why. Because it's a culture that you've created that makes people just want to be there. And I think I don't know, I don't even have a question there. I just want to say it's very special, and I think it's impressive what you've been able to do. And I'm glad it exists. And
Thank
the
you.
beef's good too. There's that. That's a nice.
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that sentiment. I hope it's all true. I hope people feel that way when they go. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I love doing that. It's my dream. It's my dream job. And I couldn't do it without people coming to it. So, like, I am grateful to every person that comes all the time.
I'm already looking forward to the next one.
And I want to say that I always say this. I have I always say my return policy. I don't put it in maybe I should put it in the thing. My return policy is, you can always get your money back for a beefsteak within 21 days, but you can never come to a beefsteak again.
Ooh.
So, like, if you didn't like it, that's fine, because I don't think it's for everyone. It's not a thing that's designed for everyone to come to. Um, and but you won't be able to come back, which I feel like is kind of fair. Like, if you want to crush it, you can. And there's a time limit on that. I do it differently, but it's probably 21 days or something like that. Like, you can't call me for this beefsteak you went to for 2 years ago and be like, I want sats back. You should probably put some caveats on that. Just 21 days. 21
Yeah.
days, satisfaction guaranteed.
I mean, have you actually had somebody like request their money back after one before?
Um, no, I have had people complain, and I offered them their money back and they didn't take it.
Hmm.
Though I did say that if they took their money back, they couldn't come back to a beefsteak.
So
And that
they
was
must
actually,
not have like had that big of complaints then. Like that's like it
I
can't have been
can't,
that drastic.
I can't tell this story. I can't tell the story. It
Okay,
feels the person, like the person, it's really specific, but it was a really weird circumstance. It was a really weird circumstance. So weird that I was certain that someone was playing a joke on me, but it turned out to be real. One of those situations.
this will have to be a story off the mic
Yeah.
when we have that pub key date. I
Yeah.
think.
Make the pub key talking note. Yeah. 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 That's right.
Yeah.
Um,
And, well, is there anything? Because I want to be conscious of time here, and I didn't even realize we've been running almost 2 hours here. It's been a treat. Is there
yeah.
anything that we didn't cover that you want to get out there, or anything else that's on your mind? This is always an open space.
I have one last podcast question for you. And
Oh, okay.
it is, what is I was thinking about how to phrase this. I'm not going to phrase it correctly, but I guess, what is the podcast episode of yours that probably if someone's scrolling through, they wouldn't listen to, but you think they should listen to?
Oh,
In other
that's
words, like,
tricky.
if someone scrolls through, they're going to listen to Lynn Alden. They're going to listen to Jeff Booth.
Mm.
Um, who would they not listen to that you think they should? Like,
Oh,
I
that's a real.
listened to part of the goat guy conversation
Yeah.
today. And I stopped because I was like getting phone calls, not because I
Hey,
wanted to stop listening to it. But I'm not using that as an example, but I'm just like, if I was scrolling through looking for the podcast to listen to, that guy would not be the podcast. And I would think that same thing about myself. Like, if you're new to Bitcoin, you're not going to scroll through and like listen to the AWAYSLICE episode. Like, I wouldn't either. Like, but the most interesting ones are, I don't know.
No, it's true. Sometimes they very much like because you're right. People are always going to listen to a Jeff Booth or a Lynn Alden. Like they're going to do it regardless.
Yeah.
Which is great because those are Jeff and Lynn are fantastic humans who deliver an incredible amount of signal, and it's really really useful. One that I would say maybe a conversation that just I personally really enjoyed that was somewhat about Bitcoin, but more I would say just philosophical in nature was with Max Hillebrand. I don't know if
Oh
you
yeah.
know him. And we didn't talk any Bitcoin price action or things like that. We talked about Austrian economics and anarchy and morality and the nature of the state. And he's just a fascinating guy. And that's one that I would say, like, if folks don't know him, I would really recommend listening to that episode because it's fascinating. And he's just like, he's a wealth of information
Yeah.
and just a cool dude. Also has a very sweet beard, like yourself. So that maybe,
His beard
I'm
seems-
partial to that.
I-
Yeah,
I know
yours is impressive.
Yeah. Sorry.
I gotta say it's. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no. After later on, I'm gonna send you a picture of my uncle. I look like my uncle right now.
Big.
The beef farmer.
Okay. Was that intentional to look like your uncle with the beard, or just it's beard
No, it's
season?
genetics. I don't have any control over it.
Fair enough. But no, that would definitely be be one that I would really recommend for folks, and just one that like I want to have Max back on the show because he's just a really cool dude.
Yeah.
And then another one that probably maybe more Bitcoiners know, like Eric Kaysen, but again, it was like it's an episode that's not explicitly about Bitcoin. Like it's again more. I guess I'm partial to the episodes a lot of times that are digging into like the nature of the state and the beast, versus just talking about Bitcoin. But that's another one that I think is honestly probably difficult for some people to listen to because Eric will just kind of very much challenge your worldview. But I think that people need that kind of thing, and they need it. They need it really badly. Another one that was pretty early on is the Damas creator, Will Kasserin.
Yeah.
We both had a few drinks during that episode, and it was an enjoyable one.
That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I hope that answers the question.
No, yeah, it definitely does. I'm going to go back and listen to them. I know and love Eric, though. Same thing as with you. I have hung out with him, but I've never had like quality time with Eric Kaysen. Love that guy. He's an awesome guy.
You know what? Maybe he can third wheel the date.
I'll allow it.
We'll be a tricycle at Pub Key.
Yeah.
No,
it's like that that meme with Dr. Ken, and he's got a sombrero on, and he says, "I'll allow it." You know the name I'm talking about?
Yep, I know exactly what you're talking about. Man, well, thanks so much. I usually I ask people at the end of this, like, where do you want to send people? Because I'll link your NOSTR and I'll link your X. Do you want me to link the beat? Don't link your X. Okay. I will only link your
NOSTR. You can only find me on NOSTR. I mean, I'm on X, but like, just don't link it. We got to push the NOSTR.
Amen. And for everyone who joined here in the live stream today for NOSTR only, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Do you want me to link the Beefsteak website as well, or you want to let people find it?
It doesn't help anybody. It just gives them another way to pester me.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, man, I've got to say this was
Walker.
It was a treat having you. Really.
It was awesome to talk to you. I look forward to doing it in person. This was really great.
Me too. I hope we're gonna make this happen sooner rather than later. I hope.
Yeah.
And that's a wrap on this Bitcoin Talk episode of the Bitcoin Podcast. If you are a Bitcoin-only company interested in sponsoring the Bitcoin Podcast, head to bitcoinpodcast.net/sponsor or send an email to hello@bitcoinpodcast.net. If you are enjoying the Bitcoin Podcast and find it valuable, give it a boost on Fountain, a 5-star review wherever you're listening, or better yet, share this show with your network so more people can learn about Bitcoin. Or don't. Bitcoin doesn't care, but I sure do appreciate it. You can grab links in the show notes to watch or listen to this show wherever you get your podcasts, or go to bitcoinpodcast.net/podcast. And you'll also find the links to follow me and the show on NOSTR and on X. Bitcoin is scarce. There will only ever be 21 million. But Bitcoin podcasts are abundant. So thank you for spending your scarce time to listen to the Bitcoin Podcast. Until next time, stay free.